යෝජනාව පිළිබඳව සමග කරන ලද සාකච්ඡාවදී John, I will first, I'll first give an order. Yeah. පක්ෂනායකවරුන් සහ මෝෂම ඉදිරිපත් කළ රාජ්‍ය විරෝධියම් සම්බන්ධන් මහතා සමග කරන ලද සාකච්ඡාවට අනුව එතුමා විසින්ද පිළිගන්නා පරිදි වලිකාමම් ප්‍රදේශයට අදාළව පවරා ඇති නඩු සම්බන්ධයෙන් එකී නඩුවල පාර්ශ්වකාරයන් ලෙස රජයේ ඇමතිවරුන් නම් කර ඇති හේින්ද එකී නඩු සම්බන්ධයෙන් අදාළ වන යෝජනාවේ කොටස සම්බන්ධව කිසිදු සාකච්ඡා කිරීමක් මෙම මෝෂමේදී පාර්ලිමේන්තු සභාගාරය තුළ නොකිරීමේ එකඟතාවට යටත්ව මෝෂම ඉදිරියට ගෙන යාමට අවසර ලබා දෙනවා. Honorable Sambandhan may propose. Honorable Sambandhan, Honorable Raja Virodhiyam Sambandhan.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
What is it? Where are you? There you go.
My adjournment motion, sir, that I have proposed to move today deals with 9 situations pertaining to land in both the northern and eastern provinces. Land issues are a matter of grave concern to the Tamil-speaking people, both the Tamil people and the Muslim people in the northeast. We have made efforts consistently to highlight these issues by bringing these matters to the notice of the authorities concerned and requested that these issues be addressed and resolved in an acceptable way. We have done so at all levels of government, but unfortunately, results have not been yielded. And consequent to results not being yielded, there is a compulsive need to raise these matters in Parliament and get a response from the government. We would like the government to examine every one of the issues that we raise. We are prepared to give assistance to the government in regard to that matter. And we are prepared to work out solutions to each of these questions. And in that background, sir, we would like to know exactly what the government's response to this position is. I will now read my motion, sir, having made those preliminary observations. And in regard to the ruling which you have been pleased to give, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to say this, that in point 1 of my motion, there is a reference to Valikamam. The allotment of land in Valikamam is totally in extent 6,381 acres, 38.97 purchase. Inside it is almost 2/3 of the city of Colombo. And about 35,000 people are being kept out of that land. It is true that some of the persons have gone to court. One of the persons who went most recently was Mr. the late Honorable Lakshman Kadirgama, the foreign minister's son, the foreign minister of this government. His son has gone to court, most recently saying that the government is illegally attempting to acquire the land. The government has stated that the land is to be acquired to formally vest the land where the Defence Battalion headquarters is currently situated in the high security zone. That is the public purpose that they have defined in regard to the reason for the acquisition of the land. Of course, we know that golf courses are coming up there, and swimming pools are coming up there, and palatial bungalows are coming up there, which cannot be categorized within the expression public purpose. But the government wants to acquire the whole land, and all these persons who own these large extent of land, 6,381 acres and 38.97 purchase, have not gone to court. And I am certainly entitled to move this motion in regard to lands of persons who have not gone to court. The rule of sub judice, if at all, would apply only to persons who have gone to court. But in deference to the discussion we had, sir, at the party leaders' meeting, I will not insist on moving the motion pertaining to Valikamam, though I do want to mention that in respect of the lands of persons who have not gone to court, out of the large extent of 6,381 acres and 38.97 purchase, I would be entitled to speak on behalf of those persons who have not gone to court. Nevertheless, sir, I have decided that I will not insist on speaking in regard to that matter. Apart from what I have mentioned already, I will say nothing more in regard to Valigamam. But we would certainly appeal to the government to take steps to ensure that their present acquisition proceedings are abandoned and that these lands are returned to the people to whom they belong, including your own foreign minister's son, the late Mr. Lakshman Kadirgama's son, whose land too you are attempting to acquire. I will now, sir, read my motion. I will read them point by point, sir, and I will make my comments on each point, because otherwise there will be a repetition of what I am saying. The government, through its armed forces and grounds of security, has continued to hold in its possession substantial extent of lands owned and or possessed by Tamil civilians, from which lands the said Tamil civilians were earlier evicted, and to which lands the said civilians have not been permitted to return for purpose of residence or livelihood. Those such security considerations do not apply any longer. I have referred to two locations, Valikamam in Jaffna district and Sampur in the Tinkamali district. Now, sir, these lands were declared as high security zones when the LTT was in possession of long-range artillery, and when installations of government were vulnerable to attacks with the use of such artillery. For that reason, a large extent of land was declared as a high security zone. Now the LTT is not there, the artillery is not there, the danger is no longer there, and there can be therefore no justification for the continuance of these high security zones. I will not comment about Valikamam, sir, in keeping with the undertaking I just gave you, but I will talk about Sampur in the Trincomalee district. In Sampur, sir, the people affected, there are 2,795 acres of land privately owned, still being held by the government and the armed forces. There are 1,486 families who have not been able to commence resettlement. I have raised this matter in Parliament even before. And on one occasion when I raised this matter in Parliament, the Honourable Basil Rajapaksa, Minister of Economic Development, is in fact present in the House even now, was kind enough to stand up and say in Parliament, in response to my urging him to give back the land to these people, he said this, and I quote, "Any land which is not necessary and which will not be acquired for the construction of the power plant will be given back to the people and they will be resettled. Any land which will not be required for the Indian Sri Lankan power plant will be handed over to the people. We have permitted them to cultivate. We want them to cultivate this time also. We will never unnecessarily keep anybody out of their own lands. We guarantee that." I was very thankful to the Honourable Minister. We would like that assurance to be kept. But the
Honourable Kayanta Karunatillaka will take chair. Honourable Member.
assurance was made by the Honourable Minister with the presiding member on the 21st of October 2011. And now we are in 2013, in the month of August. Only 2 months, over 2 years to go. Apart from one village, Navaratnapuram, where about 100 families have been resettled, the people have not been settled in the other areas. We want the people to be resettled as early as possible. As I said before, there are 2,795 acres of private land in this area, belonging to 1,486 families. There is a famous ancient temple called the Sri Patragali Ambal Temple at Sampur. An ancient temple. People can't even go to that temple. The war was over in 2019. In 2009, 4 years have gone by. So we would like, sir, these matters to be looked at and the people in Sampur to be resettled along with the persons in Vadikamam. Apart from those who have not gone to court, I'm entitled to talk about the others. But I will not insist on moving my motion, sir, as it presently stands. I'll move on to para 2 in my motion. The government, through its armed forces, has taken possession of substantial extents of land owned and or possessed by Tamil civilians, from which extent of land the said Tamil civilians were displaced as a result of the war, and to which lands the said civilians are not permitted to return for residence or livelihood by reason of the said lands being in the possession of the armed forces. Locations are Keppa Pulavu in the Mullathirivu district, Pudukudirepu, Kokulai, Akkaravali, Mariamuna, Mankulam, Ottisutan in the Mullathirivu district, Talladi, Sannar, Mullikulam, Musali, Asatkat Valley, Velankulam in the Mana district. I will give you the particulars in regard to these matters. The 59th Division of the Army has built a large military facility in Kepa Polabu in the Mullaitivu district. The families belonging to Kepa Polabu were forced to relocate to Sini Mota, a barren area southeast of Kepa Polabu, as a temporary measure upon leaving Menik Farm in September 2012. Army occupation of private land in Pudukkottai, 7th Division, for the purpose of a camp and an army hospital. Land concerned is 30 acres. Army takes over 4 shops belonging to businessmen within the Pudukkottai city limits. Army occupies Pudukkottai market land belonging to the Pradesh Sabha for the purpose of running an army canteen. Denial of access by the army to 2,000 acres of paddy land belonging to the people in Kokulai, Akkaravali, and Mariyamuna. Army occupies land close to the old army camp in Mankulam. Army occupies land in Ottusutan, the Muthiyan Kattu Water Supply Department building, the Mankulam Water Supply Department building, the Olumadu Pradesh Sabha building, and the Olumadu Ayurvedic Hospital building. All these buildings meant for public use are being occupied by the army, and the people are prevented from using these buildings for the purposes for which they are meant. In Mana district, the military has been directly responsible for the displacement of communities in the district in Mana, owing to the establishment of cantonments. Army evicted the people of Mullikulam from their homes in September 2007. Thereafter, the Navy's Northwestern Command headquarters was established in Mullikulam. Land occupied is approximately 250 acres. The boundary of the naval headquarters extends over private lands belonging to the Catholic Church, lands belonging to the schools, to the village school, and 6 large tanks. People can't have access to these areas. They're all under Army control and Navy control. Navy occupies 30 acres of land for the purpose of building the Talamana Pier. Army occupies 272 acres of land in Talladi and 3,500 acres in Sanna for a military training institute, most of which land belongs to the civilians. Army occupies 950 acres of land in Mullikulam and Musali. In Mullikulam, the entire land is owned by civilians. In Musali, 90% of the land is owned by civilians. Army occupies 10 acres of land in Artkat Valley, earlier used by the LTTE. Army occupies 600 acres of land at Vilankulam, which was a farm belonging to the Tamil civilians and later occupied by the LTTE. That is the position, sir, in regard to the extent of land buildings, irrigation facilities, which are meant to be used by the civilians, but which they are unable to use in the various areas which I have mentioned, in the Mana and the Mullaitivu districts. My third point, sir, is the government, through its armed forces, has taken possession of substantial extents of land for the purpose of the construction of housing, facilities for the armed forces, or for the purpose of agricultural activities by the armed forces, which lands would in the future become the property of the members of the armed forces in violation of the legitimate claim to such lands of citizens resident in the said areas and their descendants for their residence, livelihood, and other numerous civilian needs. Such a clandestine takeover of lands would be in violation of the law. I will now read out to you, sir, the location of all these activities by the armed forces, largely in the Mullaitivu and Kilinochchi district, where this has happened. West of the Iranamadu tank, east of the A9 highway, on 4,600 hectares of land, approximately 12,000 acres of land, approximately 10,000 houses are being built for the army. These are not camps. 10,000 houses are being built for the army. This is a large housing scheme. Majority of them are going to be soldiers from other parts of the country. They will come and settle down in those houses with their families. That's what they are planning to do. In Iranamadu, the army is cultivating 25 acres of land with vegetables. In Teraville, 150 acres of land are being cultivated by the army with fruits. In Velamkulam, about 600 acres of land are being cultivated by the army with cashew nuts. In Mukkombu, 100 acres of land are being cultivated by the army with coconuts. In Chunnaville, 600 acres of land are being cultivated by the army with cashew nuts. These are all in the Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu districts. The people can't go there. Army takes the produce for their use and markets the balance. How can people compete with the army? Army has their water pumps free, they have their fuel free, they have their fertilizer free, they have their seeds free. How can the people survive? How can the people sell their produce? And what is happening? If houses are constructed for them, the resulting position will be that the people will occupy, army will occupy those houses with their families in due course. And as far as their livelihood is concerned, they are already in possession of land. Apart from what I mentioned, army is cultivating substantial extent of land under village tanks. So they don't have to look for livelihood. It's already available. All they have to do is, at a convenient point of time, whenever they desire, bring their families and settle down in this area. I'll get on to my fourth point, sir. which is the government taking over substantial extent of land purportedly for tourism, purportedly for development activities, such as tourism and other industries, disregarding the legitimate residential and livelihood needs of persons historically inhabiting such areas, and making arbitrary allocation of such lands to chosen others in a manner that is discriminatory, lacking in due process and transparency. Locations are in Kumbripete, Kuchavali, in the Trincomalee district for tourism, Raigam, Salter and Kuchavali, Trincomalee district, an industry, the salt industry, army-run hotels in Talasivana Holiday Resort, Jaffna district, and the yogurt factory in Mailiti in the Jaffna district. Now, sir, there was a large extent of land which was used by the people of Kumbripiti and the adjoining areas for the purposes of onion cultivation. Those lands have all been taken over. These people had been cultivating onions in that land for several decades. But government apathy resulted in those people not being given permits for those lands. Some of them wanted that land for residential purposes. They don't have any land, either residential land or land for the purpose of livelihood. They wanted this land to be given to them. But now the land has been taken over for the purpose of tourism. I'm tabling, sir, the plan of the land taken over, prepared by the Surveyor General, an extent of 206 hectares, which would be about more than 500 acres. Land has been plotted out. A big golf course is due to come up there. Hotels are due to come up there. It's all being done in secrecy. There is no public notification of the availability of this land for tourist development. In one land, a tourist hotel has come up. The land has been valued at 140,000 rupees a perch, 20 billion rupees per acre. The local people have been deprived of this land, and the land is going to be used for the purposes of development at the expense of the local people, in such a way that only chosen people will have access to these lands. It's not being done under due process with any measure of transparency that would enable anyone to apply for this land. And what is much worse is that the local people who had been cultivating on this land for several decades have been deprived of the land and kept out. A salt turn called the Raigam salt turn, sir, has come up on Karachi land in extent 1,805 acres at Periya Karachi in Kuchavali in Trincomalee. When this proposal was mooted, I had the good fortune of meeting His Excellency the President and also the Honourable Minister, Mr. Basil Rajapaksa. I met them together at a meeting in the Presidential House. And when I mentioned this, I was told, no, that will not happen. No salt turn will come up there. I explained to them that over 2,000 Tamil and Muslim families depend on the expanse of Karachi land for prawn farming, from which they derive their income to sustain themselves. Over 500 other families benefit from subsidiary employment related to prawn farming. And if the land is taken over for a salt turn, 2,500 families will be affected. I appeal that it should not be taken over. The President assured me that it will not be done, but the salt turn has come up, and the salt turn is functioning. And persons are being brought to work in the salt turn from outside. And the persons who are carrying on prawn farming on this land, about 2,500 families who are depending upon the income derived from this land, both Tamil and Muslim families, have been deprived of this land. I mention this here because we want this House to know that we have taken up these questions at all levels, even at the level of the President, at the level of ministers, at the level of authorities, and asked that these things not be done. But there has been no response, no favorable response. Army is running hotels called the Thalasevan Holiday Resort and a yogurt factory in my little Jaffna. I would like to ask, sir, why the Army should be engaged in manufacturing yogurt or running hotels or holiday resorts. This surely must be left to the civilian people of that area, which would enable the people of the area to be the beneficiaries and not the Army to be the beneficiaries. My next point, sir, point number 5. The government is arbitrarily taking over lands, substantial extent of lands, wholly or partly owned or possessed by local residents, and which include irrigation and other facilities benefiting local residents, ostensibly for religious purposes. One benefit of one religion. None of us have anything else but the maximum respect and veneration for Buddhism. And I do not want to be misunderstood when I say certain things. I don't pass a Buddhist temple without bowing my head. When I go to Kadirgamam, if I travel along the Gaul Road, I always stop at the Kaluthura Mahabodhi and first pay my respects to the Kaluthura Mahabodhi before I go to Kadirgamam. I don't return from Kadirgamam without going to the Kirivihara. So I don't want any misunderstanding in regard to this matter. But substantial extent of land are being taken over in our areas for the installation of Buddhist influence. Persons belonging to the said religious group do not reside in those areas, clearly raising the question of whether the government is planning to settle on such lands. Persons of such religious faith without resort to due process and in a manner that is discriminatory and lacking in transparency. The location, sir, is Tiriyai, Sembimadap, Ilandai in the Kuchavali DS Division in Trincomalee District, Uppural, Ilangathura, Muvattavaram in the Verigal DS Division in the Trincomalee District. 1,242 hectares of land, sir. Approximately over 5,000 acres of land has been identified and surveyed. I have in my hand a copy of that plan. The plan says the land to be declared as Puja Bhumi at 3I. I tabled this plan, sir, and request that this plan be included in the Hansard at the end of my speech. There's an ancient dagoba there, which has survived the war. It's still there. There is no problem in regard to the dagoba. There are no Sinhala Buddhist people who live in this area. But 5,000 acres of land have been declared as a Puja Bhumi. What's it going to be used for? Why 5,000 acres of land? Is it going to be used to bring into that area people from outside and settle persons from the majority community and the majority religion in those areas? These are questions, vital questions that we are concerned about. That's an ancient village, 3I. No damage has been caused to the dagoba. The dagoba is quite safe. Pilgrims come from outside, they pay their respects and they return. Why should such a large extent of land be allocated for a religious purpose in that area? Sambimada in Kuchavari DS division in Trincomalee, 23 hectares of land, sir, approximately 58 acres of land, have been identified as Puja Bhumi. Why should this be done? They're said to be the remnants of an ancient Buddhist vihara in that area. Why should 58 acres of land be given? There are no Sinhala Buddhist people who live in that area, but such an extent of land is being given for a religious purpose. Ilandai Kulam, the third area, 138 hectares of land, amounting to 341 acres. Or to be declared as a Puja Bhumi. There are no Sinhalese Buddhist people living in this area. There are Muslim people living in that area. There are some Muslim people who are permit holders of this land. There was a Muslim school in that area, Ilandakulam. The Muslim people live there. But now that land is to be taken over and declared as a Puja Bhumi. I am tendering, sir, the plans in respect of Sembimala and Ilandai Kulam and the tenement sheets attached to those plans, and I request that those be made part of Hansard, sir, at the end of my speech. Ilandai Kulam, I beg your pardon, sir, Ilangai Thurab, Muhutvaram, Uppural, in the Verigal DS division, sir, in the Uppural Gramasavaka division, there was a Murugan temple from time immemorial on a rock, close to the village of Uppural and Ilangathura Muhutvaram. In those villages, In Uppural, 250 Tamil Hindu families live. Ilangaithura Mohatvaram, 350 Tamil Hindu families live. Not one single family lives in that area. Now the Murugan temple has disappeared from the rock. A monk has suddenly appeared on the rock, along with the statue of Lord Buddha. And a Buddhist temple is coming up there, has come up there. The temple has been given 5.26 hectares of land, around 13 acres. There are no single Buddhist people in that area to give dana to the monk. Dana is given to the monk by the army. There was an Amman temple, sir, called the Malainidi Amman temple at Ilangaithura Mohatvaram in the Virigal DS division. All the families who live around that area are Hindu Tamil families. Not one single Buddhist family lives there. The Amman has been removed from the rock. The Malainidi Amman have been removed from the rock and kept on the roadside in a small hut. And a statue of Lord Buddha has been installed on the rock where the Amman was. A monk resides on the rock with Lord Buddha. No single people there to give dana to the monks. Dana is given by the army. We are very concerned about these things, sir, because we see these steps being taken by the government to declare such extents of land as being required for particular religious purposes. As a deliberate, calculated attempt to change the cultural and linguistic identity of these areas. I'm sorry to state that the archaeological department is playing a very sinister role on the pretext of preserving places of archaeological value. I think they are encouraging land being taken over by persons who are motivated by a design, a definite plan. So such land can be used by them for the purposes for which they want to use it when it's convenient, which would be to change the demographic composition of those areas, change the cultural and linguistic identity of those areas. I can understand it being done if single Buddhist people live there. But no single Buddhist people live there. So how can this be done? Why should this be done? While this is being done, say, in regard to one religion, the religion of the majority, what is happening to the other places of religious and cultural importance to the Hindu Tamil people? We have a Sivan temple, say, in a village called Kanguveli in Muttur, an ancient Sivan temple called the Agasthyar Sabanam. The temple was built by Agasthyar, said to be over 2,500 years old. The temple has been destroyed. I've got with me, sir, a whole lot of pictures here of statues of the temple of Lord Ganapati, Lord Shiva, and various ceremonies being performed. They performed the Adi Amavasa festival there I've got some pictures here of members of that village engaged in a fire walking ceremony at the time of the Adi Amavata festival in that temple, which is very close to the Ganga. The temple has been destroyed. I don't want to table these pictures, sir, but I want to table a letter which I sent to the President in regard to this matter on the 29th of May 2010. In fact, I met him personally and complained to him about this matter before I sent the letter. I sent the letter. There has been no response. The temple is yet lying in a state of destruction. And the government does not seem to be concerned. Surely, sir, when we write to the government about such serious matters, if the government is not complicit in such activities, we expect a response of the government. But there has been no response. Similarly to the Kanya hot wells, 7 hot wells, an ancient place of cultural importance to the Tamil Hindu people, existing from time immemorial. People perform the 31st day ceremony of the Aniya Kith and Kin at this place. It was controlled by the local authority who maintained the hot wells, the 7 hot wells, which goes back to Ravana's time. The history of the hot wells is interrelated to Koneshwaram, which is looked upon as Dakshina Kailas, the southern abode of Lord Shiva. And now some monks have gone and taken over the place. The government agent of the area, a retired military official who had been there for 7 years, again. The Administrative Officers Association have protested against his being appointed a government agent because he's a retired army official. But the man is there for 7 years. He's been allowed to go on. He has gone to this place and removed the board of the local authority, which contained some information in regard to the importance of that place. And now, statues of Lord Buddha have appeared on in that area. Pullayar, the Lord Pullayar, there was a temple of Lord Pullayar in front of the 7 hot wells. The temple has been destroyed. The Pullayar has been taken and kept on the side in a small shed. And what one sees there are statues of Lord Buddha when we go there. I'm a little ashamed that statues of Lord Buddha are being used for such nefarious purposes. The entire objective is to take over the 7 wells, 7 hot wells, for commercial purposes, to make money out of it. And as a result of these new people taking control of that area, the Hindu public who go there and perform their 31st day ceremony, as they have done for several generations and several centuries, have several impediments in performing those ceremonies. Now, sir, I am told steps are being taken to allocate some land behind the hot wells for the construction of a vihara. And after they do that, And after they do that, they want to close the present road that leads to the hot wells, open up a new road through the Vihara to the hot wells, so that the hot wells will be annexed to the Vihara and become part of the Vihara property. I'm amazed that this type of outrageous thing is being done without the government taking any action whatever to prevent this matter. I wrote to the Honorable Basil Rajapaksa, who is the advisor to the President, about this matter and asked for the intervention of the government. I am tabling that letter, sir, dated 20th of July 2009, where I wanted the government to intervene and stop this matter. There has been no response, no answer whatever. What is the inference we have to draw? Are we to draw the inference that the government is also a party to such activities? The President delivered his Freedom Day speech, Independence Day speech, this time celebrated in Trincomalee on the 4th of February 2013. I have with me here the copy of the speech reported in the papers the next day. The President referred to the Vilgam Vihara in the course of his speech. He said, in building of the Vilgam Rajamaha Vihara here in Trincomalee, at a certain era, the Tamil Hindus also contributed as much as the Sinhala Buddhists. He seems to be aware of that. As a matter of fact, the Tamil people at one time were Buddhists. Many of them had embraced Buddhism. As you know, sir, there is not much difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. Many people take the view that Buddhism is in fact a refined and revised version of Hinduism. There are many letters, inscriptions in the Tamil language in the Vilgam Vihara, showing that Tamil people had been worshipping at that Vihara in ancient times. Now that Vihara is seeking to take over the 7 hot wells, which are the history that goes back to Ravana's time, and where the Hindu Tamil people have been performing their 31st day ceremony. I have gone there from the time of the little child to attend so many ceremonies of my dear relations. They want to take over that land for commercial purposes, attach it to the Vihara, close the existing access to the 7 hot wells, open up a new access, and this type of activity, sir, is going on brazenly without any effort on the part of the government to stop these things. Next point I want to refer to, sir, is the forcible cultivation of land by trespassers in violation of the rights of persons who own or have possessed these lands and cultivated same prior to being displaced as a result of the war, and the failure on the part of the government to take effective steps to restore possession of the said lands to the persons entitled thereto, thereby enabling them to commence their livelihood and be permanently resettled, despite numerous complaints to the relevant authorities. Location: Tennamaravadi, Kuchuveli DS Division, Padukadu, Kanguveli DS Division. People of Tennamaravadi, sir, were displaced, evicted in December 1984. That's an ancient village. People of Kanguveli were displaced in at various points of time. They have now come back. In Kangaveli, their paddy field is about 800 acres called Padukadu. In Tennamarvadi, these people have been cultivating these lands for generations and centuries. The lands are being held by other persons. By Sinhala colonists from the adjoining areas. Places like Padaviya and Dehivatya and so on and so forth. They've got their own lands. But they have trespassed on these lands and are forcibly cultivating these lands. These poor people have complained to the government agent. They have complained to the divisional secretary. They have complained to the provincial land commissioner. They have complained to the police. I have intervened on their behalf. I have requested that these people be given back their lands. I've got here with me the letters sent by them to me. The police have gone and inquired. The divisional secretaries have inquired. And despite all these inquiries being conducted by all these officials, these people will not give up possession of these lands. They are cultivating their own lands in their colonization schemes and insisting on cultivating the lands of these people, lands from which they were displaced on account of the war. And now they have come back and they want to cultivate the lands. They are unable to do so. And we are told, sir, provincial councils cannot have land powers, cannot have police powers. They must all remain with the centre to perpetuate these evil practices and to perpetrate such further evil practices. The next point, sir, that I have referred to is the forcible eviction by the armed forces of local people displaced on account of the war from lands owned or possessed by them for long, and the consequent inability of such people to be resettled on such lands to commence their livelihood. Location: Jinnapuram, Sinandankulam, Mankindi Mala, Pulmota, Kuchevedi Division, Trincomalee District, Pudumathalan, Mullivaikal West, Mullivaikal East, Ambalavan Pokkada, Valanyar Madam, Anandapuram, and Keppa Pulabu, Mullathivil District. I've got with me, sir, here a letter sent to me by 180 people, Muslim people from the Pulmota district, whose parents and grandparents lived on this land. All of them don't hold permits on account of government apathy in issuing permits. I've got with me a crown grant issued to one person to show how ancient the occupation of these lands by these people has been. They've all been chased out by the Navy, which says that they require the land and that they must leave. How can it be done? How can you chase out people like this from lands on which they have been living for so long? But they have complained to the government agent, they have complained to the divisional secretary, they have made efforts to regain possession of the land, but they have been told, no way, you can't come back to these lands. And say the Mullathivil district, families from the villages of Pudumathalan, Mullivaikal West, Mullivaikal East, Ambalavan Pokkada, Valanyar Madam, and Anandapuram. They were at Benik Farm at Chettikulam. Some of them were with host families in Babunia. They want to get back to their lands. They're all persons who are engaged in fishing. These lands are close to the sea. They want to live on their lands because they need to carry on their livelihood activities. But they have been told that they can't get back to their lands. They are wanted by the military, either for their own purposes or to bring their own fishing people there and settle them on these lands. And they have been told that they must go to a place called Kombaville, which is about 8 kilometers away from the sea. And these people who are fishermen are unable to live on their lands and carry on their fishing, and they are compelled to go to a place 8 miles away. Lands, the 9 points that I have mentioned in my motion, which is in fact my last point, the possible occupation by persons of the majority community of state lands in various parts of the north and the east, actively supported by persons in government, and the failure on the part of the government to take any action whatever in regard to such illegal occupation, clearly indicating the government complicity in such action. Such illegal action would in due course be legalized without resort to due process and in a manner lacking transparency. Location: Trincomalee Horopatana Road, Serivila Polana Road, Kantalai Serivila Road, Trincomalee Habarana Road in the Trincomalee district, Manalaru in Velioya, and a place called in Tamil Kokachankulam, now called Talabo Gasweber in the Mulattivu and Vavunia districts. I have referred to these matters even earlier in Parliament, sir, in regard to all these illegal encroachments by people on the roads that I mentioned earlier. No action has been taken by them against them. Why not? They are trespassing on state land. They will all be given permits in due course, and they will become permanent inhabitants here. Nobody is interested in stopping that. And in regard to the other matter I mentioned, sir, in regard to Manalaru, Velioya, and Kokachankulam, now called Tharubagasweber, an action, a fact-finding team, sir, had gone to this area recently, and they've come up with a report. And here's what is stated in that report. In Velioya, called in Tamil Manalaru, that was the ancient name, and Talapo Gasweber, Kokachan Kulam, that's the Tamil name. One is in Mulattivu, other is in Vavunia. Sinhalese settlers are being brought in by the government in busloads for colonization. To date, there have been about 4,800 Sinhalese families brought to Velioya, that's Manalaru, and about 2,000 families to Talabo Gasweber, that's Kokachankulam. On 20th April, President Mahinda Rajapaksa visited Velioya and personally instructed the government officials to expedite the settlement there and handed over land documents to new settlers. How come? How can this be done in this way? Current Sinhala settlement is taking place under the tight control of the governor, specially appointed army officers, and Sinhala government officers in these two areas. Even the NGOs can't have access to Velioya, Manalaru, or Talapogas Weber, Kokachankulam, without the prior permission of the officers concerned. It goes on to say that the plan to settle at least 22,000 Singhalese before the provincial council election are held in the Mullaitivu district. So you will see, Mr. Speaker, that this is the position in which we are. Now, before I proceed any further, sir, I want to pose just one question. I've dealt with the 9 matters that I've referred to in my motion, but these things seem to be done, sir, without any regard for the law. Now, I don't think under the law of the land, these things can be done. I would not read at length from these judgments, sir, but it's a judgment delivered by the Supreme Court in regard to the land powers that are vested in the provincial councils on an application made by an honourable member of this House, Mr. Vasudevan Anaikara, who went to the Supreme Court by way of a fundamental rights application. And in the course of that hearing, and when the court delivered its judgment, the court said, I'll just read one paragraph. Appendix 2 in the 13th Amendment, in our view, in the view of the Supreme Court, establishes an interactive legal regime in respect of state land within a province. While the ultimate power of alienation and of making a disposition remains with the President, the exercise of the power would be subject to conditions in Appendix 2 being satisfied. A precondition laid down in paragraph 1(3) is that an alienation or disposition of state land within a province shall be done in terms of the applicable law only on the advice of the provincial council. The advice would be of the Board of Ministers communicated through the Governor, the Board of Ministers being responsible in this regard to the provincial council. Are all these things being done on the advice of the Board of Ministers of the provincial council? Certainly not. If that is so, how are these things being done? Under what law are these things being done? Today, sir, we have many questions being raised in public in regard to the 13th Amendment. I don't want to take your time very much, sir. I will not go on. We have joint statements signed by the President along with the Secretary General of the UN. We have the statement, the speech delivered by the President to the inaugural meeting of the APRC and the Committee of Experts, where they not merely talked of the implementing in full the 13th Amendment, but going beyond the 13th Amendment, building upon the 13th Amendment, specifically about maximum devolution. President wanted maximum possible devolution when he delivered the inaugural address. He wanted security to be looked after. He wanted identity to be preserved. He wanted devolution that will enable socio-economic advancement. He talked to the Bandaranaike-Chirmanagam Pact, wanted that pact to be studied. That pact gave the entire power to select allottees to regional councils. The Dudley-Sirnaka-Chirmanagam Pact gave a preferential right, subject to the prior right of landless people in an area. In the northern and eastern provinces, to the Tamil-speaking people, primarily from the provinces concerned, and subsequently even from the rest of the country, Tamil-speaking people were to be given priority. That was the position. There were statements made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of our country, statements made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of India, where they all talked in terms of the full implementation of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution and building on the 13th Amendment so as to bring about meaningful devolution. It all is being done. Are the present actions in conformity with these assurances made at different points of time? Can the 13th Amendment be disregarded? Can it be ignored? Can the Indo-Sri Lanka Treaty be disregarded? Can it be ignored? It's covered by the Vienna Convention. No country is entitled to unilaterally abrogate that treaty. That is not possible. So this is the situation in which we are, sir. Land powers are fundamental, have demonstrated how unjust the actions that are being taken in regard to land, which has a very, very adverse impact on the people, both the Tamil people and the Muslim people of the Northeast. We have brought these matters to the notice of the government because we want the government to take action in regard to these matters. We want the government to investigate every one of the points I have raised here in this House today. We are prepared to assist the government in regard to this matter, to be able to resolve these land issues in such a way that justice is done and there's an acceptable resolution of the issue. We want the government to engage itself actively in this matter, and we are prepared to cooperate with the government to resolve these issues. But the present thinking of the government does not seem to be on those lines. Nevertheless, sir, on behalf of the Tamil-speaking people, I want to appeal to the government to kindly bring to an end these very unjust procedures and actions that presently prevail on the question of land in both the northern and eastern provinces. I thank you, sir.
Thank you. Honorable Sumantiran.
I second the motion presented by the Honourable Member for Trincomalee, and as agreed, I will not speak at length, but I will take just 2 minutes with the Chair's permission to read out a story from an ancient text. Sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." So Ahab went home, sullen and angry, because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my ancestors." He lay on his bed sulking and refused to eat. His wife Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.' Jezebel, his wife, said, 'Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite.' So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters she wrote, 'Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. But seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out, and stone him to death. So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed in the letter she had written to them. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then 2 scoundrels came and sat opposite him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying, Naboth has cursed both God and the king. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel, Naboth has been stoned to death. As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite that he refused to sell you. He is no longer alive, but dead. When Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up and went down to take possession of Naboth's vineyard. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, go down and meet Ahab the king of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard, where he has gone to take possession of it. Say to him, this is what the Lord says, have you not murdered a man and seized his property? Then say to him, this is what the Lord says, in the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood, yes, yours. Ahab said to Elijah, so you have found me, my enemy. I have found you, he answered, because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. He says, I am going to bring disaster on you. I will wipe out your descendants and cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make your house like that of Jeroboam son of Nebat and that of Baasha son of Ahijah, because you have aroused my anger and have caused Israel to sin. And also concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, dogs will devour Jezebel by the walls of Jezreel. Dogs will eat those belonging to Ahab who die in the city, and the birds will feed on those who die in the country. This is taken from the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 21. And because this story is important, I am placing to be head on after my second month speech in all 3 languages this passage. Thank you, sir.